Welcome to True Crime Case Files. In today's episode, we take you to a community shattered by the death of a promising young cheerleader. What seemed like a tragic accident at first soon unravels into a tale of secrets, betrayal, and a shocking love affair that ended in murder and a secret pregnancy. Hannah Guilford was an 18-year-old high school senior from Kokomo, Indiana, whose life was a complex mix of triumph and turmoil. As a star cheerleader at Kokomo Community High School, Hannah was adored by her peers and admired for her dazzling performances during halftime routines. Her radiant personality and athletic prowess earned her the nickname Sparkle, and she frequently appeared in local newspapers highlighting her achievements in cheerleading competitions. Hannah dreamed of attending college to study kinesiology, with the goal of becoming a physical therapist for athletes. Hannah lived with her parents, Randy Guilford, 38, and Katrina Guilford, 34, in a cozy suburban home. Randy, a sales manager, had once been a talented football player before an injury derailed his career. He projected his unfulfilled aspirations onto Hannah, urging her to aim for perfection in her cheerleading and academics. Katrina, who had once been an energetic presence at Hannah's practices, had grown distant over the years. Her battle with alcoholism and feelings of inadequacy left her withdrawn, creating tension in the household. Beneath her bubbly exterior, Hannah harbored a secret that consumed her every waking moment. She had become romantically involved with her cheerleading coach, Masterson, a charismatic and influential figure in the school's athletics program. Their relationship escalated into a forbidden affair, which became even more complicated when Hannah discovered she was pregnant with this child. Conflicted and terrified, Hannah confided in no one, not even her closest friends, fearing the scandal that would erupt if the truth came out. In the weeks leading up to her death, Hannah's life was a swirl of activity and mounting anxiety. She juggled preparing for final exams, cheerleading commitments, and the looming decisions about her future. Friends noticed she seemed unusually preoccupied, her usually radiant smile giving way to bouts of sadness. At home, arguments between her parents intensified with her father's relentless pressure and her mother's drinking, creating a volatile environment. Hannah's last days were a heartbreaking combination of hope and despair. She dreamed of breaking free from the secrets and pressures that dominated her life, imagining a future where she could embrace her passions and newfound responsibilities. Tragically, those dreams would be shattered by the devastating events that followed. On the morning of May 12, 2016, at around 7:30 a.m., Randy Guilford descended into the basement of his family's home in Kokomo, Indiana, expecting to see his daughter, Hannah, preparing for another day at school. Instead, Randy encountered a scene that would forever alter his life. Hannah's lifeless body lay at the bottom of the stairs, surrounded by cheerleading gear and ribbons, including trophies from competitions she had won. The basement, once a source of pride showcasing Hannah's accomplishments, was now the site of a devastating tragedy. Randy froze, unable to process what he was seeing. The 38-year-old sales manager, who had poured so much of his energy into encouraging Hannah's success, felt a wave of disbelief and panic wash over him. After a few agonizing moments, he rushed to her side, desperately searching for signs of life. But it was clear that she was gone. The vibrant daughter who had been the center of his world now lay motionless at his feet. Struggling to regain composure, Randy shakily dialed 911. "My daughter, she's not breathing," he stammered. His voice was choked with emotion as he tried to describe what he had found. The 911 operator asked for details, but Randy could barely focus, his thoughts consumed by the horrible reality that Hannah would never achieve the dream she had worked so hard for. Within minutes, paramedics arrived and confirmed Randy's worst fears. Hannah was dead. The once bustling basement was eerily silent, save for Randy's heavy breathing and the faint hum of a television left on upstairs. Meanwhile, Katrina Guilford, Hannah's mother, was still asleep in her bedroom. Groggy from a night of heavy drinking, Katrina was unaware of the tragedy unfolding just below her. It wasn't until Randy's anguished cries echoed through the house that she woke up, disoriented and confused. As the reality of what had happened sank in, her screams pierced the quiet morning, adding another layer of heartbreak to the devastating loss that now engulfed the Guilford family. The Kokomo police arrived at the Guilford residence around 8:00 a.m. on May 12, 2016. Responding to Randy Guilford's frantic 911 call, leading the investigation was Detective Brielle Mermaid Reno, a seasoned officer with over 5 years on the force. Known for her sharp instincts and no-nonsense demeanor, Reno was prepared for the challenges of a complex case. The sudden death of a popular high school cheerleader like Hannah Guilford was bound to send shockwaves through the community. When Reno and her team descended into the basement, the scene raised immediate red flags. Hannah's body lay at the foot of the stairs, surrounded by cheerleading gear, including her competition trophies and pom-poms. All the injuries on her body suggested a fall, the positioning of her limbs, and the lack of blood at the scene hinted at something far more sinister. The basement, dimly lit by morning light filtering through small windows, was adorned with framed photos and ribbons celebrating Hannah's cheerleading career. Despite the outward appearance of a tragic accident, Reno's trained eye caught subtle inconsistencies. The room was cluttered, but nothing seemed out of place or disrupted, unusual for a fall severe enough to result in death. Forensic technicians began combing the area, snapping photographs and collecting evidence. A large cheerleading trophy lying near Hannah's body drew particular attention. It bore faint smudges that could be fingerprints, and its weight made it a plausible murder weapon. Reno ordered it bagged and tagged for analysis. The investigation expanded to the rest of the house. In the living room, the TV was still playing Good Morning America, its cheerful tone incongruous with the tragedy. Katrina Guilford sat on the couch, her face pale and drawn. A half-empty bottle of vodka stood on the coffee table, a stark reminder of her long battle with alcohol. Randy paced nearby, visibly distraught but cooperative with the officers. Later that day, the coroner's preliminary report delivered a bombshell. Hannah was not only pregnant but also HIV positive. This discovery deepened the mystery surrounding her death. Investigators began probing her relationships, including her troubling and illicit affair with her cheerleading coach, Eric Masterson, a married man with significant influence in the school district. Detective Reno's instincts told her that Hannah's death was no accident. The combination of her pregnancy, her medical condition, and the eerie details of the scene pointed to a much darker story. As the investigation unfolded, the truths uncovered would send shockwaves through the tight-knit community. The first person Detective Brielle Mermaid Reno focused on was Coach Eric Masterson, the 46-year-old cheerleading coach at Kokomo Community High School. Known for his commanding presence and ability to inspire his team, Masterson was a respected figure in the community. Beneath his polished reputation, however, Reno suspected there might be secrets he was desperate to keep hidden. At the station, Masterson sat in a dimly lit interrogation room, a sheen of sweat already forming on his brow. The stark walls and the faint hum of the air conditioning made the tension in the room feel almost tangible. Masterson initially appeared cooperative, speaking highly of Hannah Guilford, describing her as one of the most talented and driven young women he had ever coached. She had such potential, he said, his voice wavering slightly. The way she commanded attention on the mat, it was like she was born for it. Reno's questions soon turned more probing. She asked about Masterson's personal relationship with Hannah and whether it extended beyond the cheerleading practices. Masterson stiffened but denied any inappropriate contact, claiming their relationship was strictly professional. His unease, however, was unmistakable. The turning point came when Reno placed a folder on the table, sliding it toward Masterson. Inside were copies of explicit text messages and photographs exchanged between him and Hannah, messages sent just days before her death. Masterson's confident facade cracked as he stared at the evidence. His face drained of color, and his hands trembled as he clutched the edges of the table. She made me hotter than a dog in heat, he stammered. But I never meant for it to go this far. Reno pressed harder. We know Hannah was pregnant, Coach Masterson, she said, her voice calm but firm. The autopsy confirmed it, and the timeline points to you as the father. Masterson's jaw tightened, and his breathing grew shallow. Before he could respond, Reno delivered another bombshell. She also tested positive for HIV. Tests have confirmed that she contracted it from you. The weight of the revelations crushed any composure Masterson had left. He buried his face in his hands, muttering, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know I was positive. When Reno pressed him on whether Hannah knew, he shook his head vehemently. No, she didn't. I never wanted to hurt her. Despite his admissions, Masterson continued to deny involvement in Hannah's death. He claimed he had no knowledge of her plans that morning and insisted their relationship, while inappropriate, had been consensual. His growing agitation, however, only deepened Reno's suspicion. When the interrogation ended, Masterson was released pending further investigation, but Reno made her position clear. "You're at the center of this now, Coach," she said, her gaze unflinching, "and I won't stop until I find out what happened to Hannah." Next, Detective Brielle Mermaid Reno turned her attention to Randy Guilford, Hannah's 38-year-old father. Randy worked as a sales manager at a local auto dealership and was a prominent figure in Kokomo. Known for his ambitious nature, Randy had a reputation for living vicariously through Hannah's achievements. A former high school athlete, his cheerleading career had been cut short by a back injury, leaving him with unfulfilled dreams he projected onto Hannah. He pushed her relentlessly to excel, ensuring she was the star of the team. On the morning of Hannah's death, Randy had been at work but rushed home the moment he received the call. By the time he arrived, police officers were already on the scene. Witnesses described Randy as visibly shaken yet oddly focused, repeatedly asking how the tragedy would affect Hannah's reputation and the family's standing in the community. His agitation overshadowed his grief, raising Reno's suspicions. During his interview with Reno, Randy presented himself as a grieving yet proud father, emphasizing the sacrifices he had made for Hannah's success. "She was the best," Randy said, his voice tight with emotion. "Hannah was going to go far, and I made sure she had every opportunity. She had the talent, the drive, everything." When Reno shifted the conversation toward Hannah's personal life, particularly her relationship with Coach Masterson, Randy's demeanor changed. He became defensive and evasive, insisting that his involvement in Hannah's cheerleading career was strictly supportive. Reno, however, had uncovered evidence to the contrary. Text messages retrieved from Randy's phone revealed an unsettling dynamic. Randy had been aware of Hannah's inappropriate relationship with Coach Masterson, and in some instances had actively facilitated it. In one message, Randy suggested meeting times for Hannah and Masterson, offering to cover for her at home. Another message from Randy congratulated Masterson after Hannah's stellar performance at a regional competition, with a disturbing insinuation that their relationship had positively influenced her routines. When confronted with this evidence, Randy's composure began to crack. He initially denied knowledge of the texts, but eventually admitted to being aware of their relationship. "I thought it was harmless," he muttered. "She was happy, and he cared about her success as much as I did." Reno noticed, however, that his voice wavered when he spoke, and his hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his watch repeatedly, a telltale sign of nervousness. Reno also explored Randy's reaction to learning that Hannah had been pregnant with Masterson's child and that she was HIV positive, a fact the autopsy revealed. Randy's face darkened, and he clenched his fists tightly. "I didn't know," he said through gritted teeth. "If I had, I would have stopped it." Despite his claims of ignorance, Randy's behavior suggested otherwise. Reno suspected that Randy's deep concern for the family's image, coupled with his knowledge of Hannah's relationship with Masterson, might have driven him to act impulsively. As the interview concluded, it became clear to Reno that Randy was withholding critical information, and his role in the events surrounding Hannah's death remained under intense scrutiny. The final suspect on Detective Brielle Mermaid Reno's list was Katrina Guilford, Hannah's 34-year-old mother. Katrina had once been a vivacious woman, a former cheerleader herself, and a small-town beauty queen with a magnetic personality. By May 2016, however, Katrina had become a shadow of her former self, battling alcoholism and struggling with feelings of inadequacy. Her marriage to Randy had grown cold and distant, with Randy focusing all his energy on Hannah's cheerleading career. Katrina often felt invisible in her own home. Katrina's struggles with alcohol had become an open secret in the community. Neighbors frequently saw her at the local liquor store, purchasing bottles of inexpensive wine and vodka. Her drinking had escalated to the point where sobriety was rare, and her erratic behavior had alienated her from friends and family alike. Her relationship with Hannah was strained as well. Katrina resented the immense pressure Randy placed on Hannah to succeed, and was envious of the strong bond between her daughter and her husband. On the morning of Hannah's death, Katrina was at home. It was Katrina who discovered Hannah's body in the basement and called 911. Her voice on the call was frantic and slurred, and when officers arrived, they found her in a near-hysterical state, alternating between uncontrollable sobbing and screaming. Her unkempt appearance and the smell of alcohol on her breath immediately raised concerns. During her interview with Detective Reno, Katrina's behavior was erratic. She swung between emotional outbursts and moments of unsettling calm. When asked about her relationship with Hannah, Katrina's responses were inconsistent. "Hannah was my baby," she said over and over, but when pressed for details about their interactions in the days before her death, she stumbled through vague and disjointed answers. Reno shifted her questions to Katrina's relationship with Coach Masterson, and Katrina's demeanor shifted sharply. Her face twisted in anger, and she launched into a tirade, accusing her daughter of stealing Masterson's attention. "Hannah was always the perfect little girl," Katrina spat bitterly, "but she had no right to take what was mine. That man was supposed to love me." Her words revealed a simmering jealousy that bordered on obsession. As the interview continued, Katrina's agitation grew. When Reno gently suggested that Hannah's death might not have been an accident, Katrina exploded, shouting incoherently before collapsing into tears. Her volatility made it challenging for Reno to piece together a coherent narrative. But the detective noted a pattern of resentment and jealousy in Katrina's ramblings, both toward her daughter and others in her life. Katrina's unstable demeanor and emotional volatility marked her as a person of interest. Reno couldn't ignore the possibility that Katrina's deep-seated resentments, coupled with her deteriorating mental state, might have led to tragedy. As the interview ended, Reno walked away with more questions than answers. But one thing was certain: Katrina Guilford's troubled history and volatile emotions placed her at the center of this heartbreaking case. On May 18, 2016, just a week after Hannah Guilford's tragic death, a startling new development rocked the town of Kokomo. It happened during Hannah's memorial service held in the high school gymnasium, where hundreds of mourners gathered to honor the cheerleader's life. The atmosphere was somber, with tearful tributes and heartfelt speeches, but it was Randy Guilford's unexpected outburst that left the crowd in stunned silence. Randy, clearly intoxicated and visibly shaken, stood abruptly in the middle of the service. His speech was slurred, but his words were unmistakable. He confessed to knowing that his wife, Katrina Guilford, had killed their daughter. In a moment of raw emotion, Randy admitted that he had helped Katrina stage the scene to look like an accident in a desperate bid to protect their family from public disgrace. Gasps filled the room as mourners struggled to process the shocking revelation. Detective Brielle "Mermaid" Reno, who had attended the service to discreetly observe the family's behavior, immediately realized the case had reached a critical turning point. Following Randy's confession, officers from the Kokomo Police Department quickly moved to detain him for further questioning. Investigators also returned to the Guilford home with fresh insights into what they might find. This time, when they searched the basement where Hannah's body had been discovered, they looked with new purpose. Using Randy's confession as a guide, officers found traces of blood that had been inadequately cleaned, along with additional shards of a shattered trophy that had been overlooked during the initial investigation. Forensic analysis re-examined the scene, confirming that the blood matched Hannah's DNA. The evidence, combined with Randy's detailed confession, revealed a harrowing account of the events leading to Hannah's death. Investigators determined that Katrina had struck Hannah with the trophy during a heated argument, and Randy, consumed by fear and loyalty, had aided Katrina in covering up the crime. The town of Kokomo was left in shock. What had initially been mourned as a heartbreaking accident was now understood to be a gruesome murder, concealed by the very people who were supposed to love and protect Hannah. With this new evidence, the investigation reached a pivotal moment, setting the stage for a dramatic arrest and a revelation that would haunt the community for years to come. Following Randy Guilford's shocking confession at his daughter Hannah's memorial service, the Kokomo Police Department wasted no time advancing the investigation. On May 20, 2016, just 38 hours after Randy's revelation, authorities officially identified Katrina Guilford as the prime suspect in Hannah's murder. Katrina, a 34-year-old homemaker battling severe alcoholism, had long been a troubled figure in the community. Her erratic behavior and strained relationship with Hannah were well known to neighbors and friends, but the truth of her involvement in her daughter's death was devastating to many. Detective Brielle "Mermaid" Reno led the effort to bring Katrina into custody. The arrest unfolded early that morning as the team assembled outside the Guilford home. Overcast skies loomed above, mirroring the somber tension among the officers. When Katrina answered the door, she appeared disheveled and visibly weary, as though the weight of her guilt had physically aged her in the days since the memorial. She offered little resistance and quietly submitted to the arrest. As the handcuffs clicked into place, Katrina broke into tears, not out of shock but resignation. She seemed to know the truth had finally caught up with her. As Katrina was escorted to the waiting police car, the usually bustling suburban neighborhood fell eerily silent. Only the faint hum of morning traffic in the distance broke the stillness. At the station, Katrina was formally charged with the murder of her daughter, Hannah Guilford. During her initial interrogation, Katrina was emotional but surprisingly cooperative. She provided a chilling account of the events leading up to the murder. According to Katrina, the tragedy began with a heated argument on the night of Hannah's death. Katrina, deeply intoxicated, confronted Hannah in a jealous rage over her daughter's rumored relationship with Coach Masterson. A relationship that Katrina had secretly coveted for herself. The argument escalated, and in a moment of blind fury, Katrina grabbed one of Hannah's cheerleading trophies and struck her, delivering the fatal blow. Panicked, Katrina called Randy, who returned home to find his daughter lifeless. Overcome by fear and desperation, Randy made the decision to help Katrina cover up the crime. Together, they staged the scene to look like a tragic accident. They moved Hannah's body to the bottom of the basement stairs, scattering cheerleading gear to make it appear as though she had fallen. Randy hoped this would protect their family from scandal, but his conscience ultimately forced him to reveal the truth. Katrina Guilford's arrest sent shockwaves through the tight-knit community of Kokomo. The Guilford family, once admired for their success and unity, now stood exposed as fractured and deeply troubled. The community grappled with feelings of anger, sorrow, and disbelief as they struggled to reconcile how a mother could commit such a horrific act against her own child. Katrina Guilford's trial for the murder of her daughter, Hannah Guilford, began in late August 2018 at the Jackson County Courthouse in Kokomo, Indiana. The case became a local sensation, with media outlets like the Southern Indian providing exhaustive coverage. The courtroom was filled with spectators, many of whom had known the Guilford family for years and sought closure for the tragedy that had shaken their community. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Mark Uno, a seasoned attorney known for his unwavering stance on violent crimes, argued that Katrina's actions were deliberate and premeditated. Uno presented Katrina as a woman consumed by jealousy and resentment over her daughter's close relationship with Coach Eric Masterson, a bond Katrina had desperately craved for herself. He emphasized the brutality of the act, describing how Katrina had struck Hannah with a cheerleading trophy and then enlisted her husband, Randy, to stage the crime scene to look like an accident. Forensic evidence and Randy's confession formed the backbone of the prosecution's case, leaving little room for doubt. On the defense side, attorney Lil Boonranch, a public defender known for her compassionate approach to challenging cases, argued that Katrina's actions were not premeditated. Instead, she framed them as the result of a momentary lapse in judgment, fueled by years of emotional distress, alcoholism, and an escalating argument with her daughter. Boonranch portrayed Katrina as a woman overwhelmed by her circumstances, a struggling mother who had reached her breaking point. She urged the jury to consider Katrina's history of mental health struggles and addiction, pleading for leniency and framing her client's actions as those of a deeply flawed but ultimately broken individual. Throughout the trial, Hannah's classmates, cheer teammates, and friends attended in support of the Guilford family, their grief evident. They listened intently as testimony painted conflicting pictures of Katrina, both as a loving mother who had lost her way, and as a jealous woman who allowed her emotions to spiral out of control. After 2 days of deliberation, the jury returned a verdict: guilty of second-degree murder. Katrina Guilford was sentenced to 25 years in prison without the possibility of parole. The verdict brought a bittersweet sense of closure to Hannah's friends and family, but the community remained divided. Some believed justice had been served and that Katrina's punishment was appropriate given the magnitude of her crime. Others argued that her actions, though horrific, were the result of her untreated struggles and that the sentence was unduly harsh. For Randy Guilford, the trial signified the final destruction of his family. His own complicity in the cover-up left him grappling with guilt and the heavy task of rebuilding his life after such a tragic and public downfall. In the aftermath of Katrina Guilford's trial, life in Kokomo, Indiana was irrevocably changed for everyone involved. Katrina, now serving a 25-year sentence at Logan Correctional Center, lived a life of isolation and regret. Once a familiar presence at her daughter Hannah's cheerleading competitions, Katrina now spent her days in the monotony of prison life. She grappled with the weight of her actions, her vibrant personality dulled by the consequences of her crime. Randy Guilford, Hannah's father, was left to face the wreckage of his family. He sold their home, unable to endure the memories of the house where his daughter had died. Moving to a modest apartment on the outskirts of town, Randy retreated from public life. The guilt of his complicity in covering up Hannah's murder consumed him, and his once respected status in the community was replaced by alienation. Struggling with worsening alcoholism, Randy became a recluse, rarely seen by neighbors or old friends, his days blending into an endless cycle of remorse and solitude. Coach Eric Masterson, whose controversial relationship with Hannah had been at the heart of the scandal, resigned from his position at Kokomo High School. While he faced no legal charges, the revelations about his inappropriate conduct irreparably damaged his reputation. Unable to find work in education, Masterson relocated out of state, hoping to rebuild his life in obscurity. However, his past followed him wherever he went, forcing him into low-profile jobs and a life lived in the shadows, far removed from the influence he once held. The community of Kokomo, previously united in admiration for the Guilford family and pride in its youth programs, was left fractured and disillusioned. Hannah's death and the subsequent trial revealed dark undercurrents within the town, breaking the illusion of a close-knit, idyllic community. While some residents sought to heal and move forward, others remained haunted by the tragedy, which stood as a grim reminder of the secrets and tensions that can unravel even the most cherished lives. As the years passed, Hannah Guilford's story lingered like a ghost over Kokomo. Her memory was preserved by friends and classmates who honored her with a memorial at the high school, but the pain of her loss and the scandal surrounding her death served as a cautionary tale of the devastating consequences of jealousy, rage, and betrayal.